wisdom, time will run. After educating, sharing the wealth, building things you should do from trust to breaking. It's all a must. Your guide to what this learning can trust. Let's unite us to do it right. Dreams take shape with every insight. Wills and assets, life insurance plans, building for the future with expert hands. Sometimes building wealth with knowledge galore. Asset protection plans to grow. Dreaming and watch your dreams overflow. From saving today to trust for life. Breaking generational wealth divides. Healthcare directives, banking tips. We're here to help you function eclipse. From saving today to trust for life. Breaking generational wealth divides. Healthcare directives, banking tips. We're here to help you function eclipse. And now it's time to learn. So wisdom's your return. Invest, protect, and thrive for sure. Signing off is all talks, money, and more.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to Soul Talks Money and More. I am your host, Dr. Sabrina Edmon Williams, educator, author, and investor, opening minds and closing contracts. I am, so noted. And this morning, I want to talk about our babies and not just what we are going to leave to them, but what we are putting in place for them. So this morning, I need you to get up, grab your coffee, call a friend, text a friend, tell them Dr. Williams is on the radio and we are having a serious conversation. I need the parents, I need the grandparents, I need the aunts and the uncles to tune in and listen up this morning, because all of us, for the most part, have dreams and desires for our children. We want the best for them. And in many instances, the best, as some of us define it, is going to college. We want those children to go to college, and that's a wonderful thing. But here's my question. What are you doing today financially to make that possible tomorrow? Again, what are you doing today financially to make college possible tomorrow? Because the reality is, hope is not an education funding strategy. So we've got to be doing some things today to make sure that we have things in place. We cannot simply sit back and hope that our child gets a scholarship. We cannot simply sit back and hope that our child gets a Pell Grant. That may or may not happen. But putting $50 in an account when that baby is 2 years old can be much more powerful than simply scrambling to find thousands of dollars when the baby turns 18. So today we're going to have a conversation about 3 different tools that families can use to invest money for children. And if I'm being honest, I got to give credit where credit is due. My good friend, Mr. Sherry Jones, actually started a conversation here on air. He and I were on air a few weeks ago, and he mentioned something to me, and I told him I would revisit this during my show. So here I am. This morning, we're talking about options for investing money for your children to prepare for their education. And I'm not just going to simply say college education, because once we get into some of these tools, you'll understand that they can be used, some of them before college. So what are we talking about this morning, Dr. Williams? We're talking about the Coverdell Education Savings Account, state-sponsored 529 plan, and the new Trump account, And before anybody changes the station, simply because I dared to say the word Trump, I need you to stay with me and understand something. This is not a political show. This is a money show. So talks money and more. I don't care. I do not care whether you voted for Mr. Trump or against Mr. Trump, or even if you didn't vote at all. I'm concerned if you didn't vote at all, but I don't today. That's not what this is about. Or if you simply don't want to hear the man's name before you've had your coffee this morning, we're going to talk about these Trump accounts. My responsibility this morning is to help you understand what the law actually provides so that you can make an informed financial decision for your family. Okay, let's not get it twisted. It's not about anybody else's family. It's about your family and what you have available for your family. Now, there is a $1,000 federal contribution potentially available for millions of children born between January the 1st, 2025 and December 31st, 2028. I don't want our families making financial decisions based solely on a politician's name. Okay? That's why this is an educational platform. We got to educate our people. You don't have to like the name on an account to understand the money in the account. Let me say that again, because somebody needs to hear that. You do not have to like the name on the account to understand the money in the account. Now, before we get into comparing these or looking at each one of them individually, there are a few phrases, two to be exact, that I want to, I'm going to be using these repeatedly. And again, because this is an educational platform, we need to understand these terms, what they mean and what they mean in terms and in context of these particular accounts. Those terms are tax-deferred and tax-free. They are not the same thing. And it's okay if you did not know that. Again, this is an educational show. And after we finish with class today, you will, and my hope is that you should have a different understanding or a deeper understanding. Now, tax deferred essentially means you don't owe taxes right now. Doesn't mean you don't owe taxes. It simply means they are not due right now. In contrast, tax-free means under the applicable rules, you don't owe taxes at all. Now, that distinction matters tremendously when you are talking about compounding money for a period of, let's say, 10, 15, 20, or even 50 years. Now, here's the simple version. A properly used 529 plan can provide tax-free investment growth and federally tax-free qualified withdrawals. So when you put the money in, it's after tax, but it can grow tax-free. And when you withdraw the money out of the account, there is no tax responsibility or tax obligation on those qualified withdrawals. That is the 529 plan. 529 is here in the state of Mississippi. It's known as Impact. You may be familiar with that term, the Impact program that we have. And in other states, they're called other things. But in essence, they are all 529 plans. Okay. Now, another one is the Coverdell ESA or Educational Savings Account, Coverdell. And it can also provide tax-free growth and tax-free qualified education withdrawals. And that brings us in contrast to the new Trump accounts. They operate more like a traditional IRA. And if those of you that are familiar with the traditional IRA, you know the money goes into the IRA before taxes, okay? Before taxes. So this particular account, it operates like a special type of traditional IRA, but simply for a child. It's an investment earnings that grows tax deferred, not automatically tax-free, tax deferred. And remember, we just distinguished the two. Tax deferred means you don't owe taxes right now, but the tax man is waiting for you at the end of the rainbow with his hand out, okay? Tax-free means, hey, see you, wouldn't want to be you. I don't owe you a thing, okay? Just make sure that we understand those differences. So again, 529 plan can provide for tax-free growth as well as tax-free qualified withdrawals. The Coverdell Education Savings Account, again, can provide for tax-free growth and tax-free qualified education withdrawals. In contrast, the new Trump accounts operate more like the traditional, which means they are tax deferred, and there is an expectation that taxes will be paid on any growth on these particular accounts at the time of withdrawal. Okay, so these accounts, just by that very distinction, they are not interchangeable. Tax deferred means Uncle Sam may be waiting. And I say may, but you know, like I know, we live in America. Uncle Sam is going to be waiting for you. Tax-free means if you follow the rules, Uncle Sam doesn't get a piece of that pie. Okay? Now, let's break them down and look at them individually. Let's start with the Coverdell ESA. Now, remember I told you guys, don't get caught up in the name of something. I know people may be having, a hard time with this new Trump account, just simply because of the name that's on it. Coverdell ESA, okay? Coverdell, you guys, okay, newsflash, that's someone's name. That is someone's name. This particular account was renamed, wasn't initially named Coverdell, but it was renamed in honor of the Senator Paul Coverdell from Georgia, Republican senator, who introduced this legislation into Congress. Now, I don't know a thing about Mr. Coverdell. I never met him. I don't know nothing about the man's policies. But what I do know is I did seize the opportunity to open Coverdell accounts for my children. I did not care whose name was on it. I still don't care whose name is on it. I was looking for the benefit that these particular accounts could provide for my financial plan. And so I want to encourage us again, don't get caught up in a name and miss what we could be doing right now to start building for our children, and us grandparents, for our grandchildren as well. Now, the Coverdell accounts, it's an account specifically created to help pay qualified education expenses for beneficiaries, okay? Here's something I really, really like about these Coverdell accounts. It isn't limited to college. You can literally use, and the IRS does allow this, qualified distributions for eligible elementary, secondary, and higher education expenses. So there are many people that send their children to private schools, okay? You might want to think, if you don't have one of these Coverdell education savings accounts set up, you might want to look at this as a tool to use. You and your family can use this as a way to offset some of these expenses associated with elementary, secondary, and higher education expenses, okay? This is the Coverdell account. Remember, you are contributing after-tax dollars into this account, and there is no federal deduction on your income taxes for your contribution. No, there is not. That's not one of the benefits that you get from this. But the money can be invested and potentially grow tax-free if withdrawals are used for qualified educational expenses. Those qualified distributions are generally tax-free. So that's a pro, that's a plus, okay? But here's the problem. There's always a pro, and then here's the con. The contribution limit is tiny. It's small compared to today's education expenses. In fact, the total contribution from all sources generally cannot exceed $2,000 per beneficiary per year. So that's not $2,000 from grandma or grandpa plus, big mama or big daddy. No, it's $2,000 total for that child per year. And there are also some income restrictions on who can contribute to this particular account. Now, generally, the beneficiary must be under 18 when contributions are made, with exceptions for certain special needs beneficiaries. The IRS generally requires remaining funds to be distributed within 30 days after the beneficiary reaches 30, unless an exception applies. Okay, but you do have an option. Another option can be transferring or rolling over the account to an eligible family member. So this is important because you think about the number of children that are like me. You know, I went to graduate school. I didn't finish graduate school until I was into my let's see, I was 31, maybe 31, 32 when I finished graduate school. So for someone like myself, now this was, established after I finished, but for someone like myself that was on quote unquote the extended plan, this would have been helpful for me. And so you have to think about that, because a lot of our children now are staying in school longer to pursue, advanced degrees that can include everything from, master's degrees to specialist degrees to doctorate degrees to, going into professional fields, law, medicine. So it is likely that they may be in school for a little longer. So a Coverdell education savings account may be something that you might want to consider for meeting the education needs of your family. Now let's talk about compounding for a minute. And we're still on the Coverdell. So if you're just joining us, if you're just tuning in this morning, come on in, grab your coffee. We want to have you to be a part of this conversation, because many of us don't really understand what we mean when we talk about these different education accounts, nor do we understand the benefits of them. So we're breaking it down for you this morning, breaking it down like a fraction for you this morning. We're talking about the 529 education saving plans. Those are the state-sponsored plans. We're talking about the Coverdell education savings account, and we are talking about the new Trump accounts. Yes, we are. Now, let's talk compounding. Suppose, and we're just supposing for illustration purposes, let's just suppose you were able to invest $2,000 each year for 18 years and earned an average of about a 7% return. You would have contributed $36,000 total. Okay, so just in case somebody wondering, that's just 2,000 times 18, which is 36. Okay, 36,000 total. Now, depending on exactly when contributions were made and investment performances, that money could potentially grow to roughly $68,000 to $73,000. And that's why starting early matters. And remember, 7% is an illustration. It's not really a guaranteed return. We're simply doing a hypothetical. So you see visually in your mind how this money could potentially grow. But you got to start. Your greatest advantage may not be how much money you have. Your greatest advantage may be how much time you give your money to grow. That means you cannot wait until that child is in the 9th grade and start thinking about a plan for the child. And I know a lot of people will say, well, Dr. Williams, we don't have the money, or we can't save, or, we got things are hard at our house. You just don't understand. Okay. I would challenge you to think about this. Even those same families where things are tight and things are hard, they find a way to come up with money for Christmas presents. They find a way to come up with money for birthday presents. They find a way to do everything that they want to do. So this really has to be something that we want to do, an investment that we want to make in our children. We got to stop using excuses about what we cannot do. We can do this. This is why we're having this conversation this morning. If you know you got babies, if you know you got grandbabies, go ahead and start early and allow that money to compound. All right, enough of that. We're going to move on to these 529 plans. Now, This is probably the best known education savings vehicles because, again, these are typically state sponsored qualified tuition programs or education programs. Unlike the Coverdale's 529 plans, don't have that little $2,000 federal annual contribution ceiling. States establish their own overall account limits, which can be very substantial. They can be very substantial. Federal gift tax rules can also affect large contributions. So generally, you don't receive a federal income tax deduction for contributing to these 529 plans. Some states, however, will provide their own tax credit. They will provide their own tax credit or tax deduction, though, and it varies by state. So you have to check your own state to find out the answer to that. But here's where this 529 can become very powerful. Your investments can grow without annual federal taxation, and qualified withdrawals are generally federally tax-free. Okay? We got to get comfortable with that word, tax-free. Tax-free. And I know we understand it because every year, right before school starts, we have this tax-free day in many of our states, and everybody jumps on top of the opportunity to save 7%. Tax-free, 7% in taxes, okay? Okay, imagine compounding. And I want us to understand this compounding rule works for you depending on which side of it you're on, okay? So if you're on the receiving end, it works really well for you. If you're on the paying end, not so well, okay? Not so well. So let's get very familiar with tax-free. Now, that means tax-free, if you put money into a 529 plan and it grows substantially over 15 or 18 years, you don't have to give the government part of those earnings when you withdraw them for qualified education expenses. Qualified expenses can include things like college tuition, fees, books, supplies, certain room and board expenses, and other eligible costs. Okay, that's the 529 plan. Federal law also permits certain 529 deductions for K through 12 education and student loan repayment, subject to applicable limitations. And the recent law has expanded the usefulness of 529 money for additional education and training expenses. So I know some of you are saying, well, Dr. Williams, that sounds good. But now every child doesn't go to college. And what happens if my child doesn't want to go to college? And I understand that because college is not necessarily for every child. So that is a very good question. What happens if your child doesn't want to go to college? This is actually one of the biggest objections I typically hear when we start talking about saving for college. My child may not go to college, so I don't want all my money trapped inside of that 529. Well, the rules have actually become much more flexible. Depending upon the circumstances, you may actually be able to change the beneficiary to another eligible family member, or you may be able to use funds for other qualified educational purposes. In fact, under the Secure 2.0 Act, qualifying unused 529 funds can potentially be rolled into a Roth IRA for the beneficiary. And that's subject to several requirements, okay? Among those requirements, the 529 generally must have existed for at least 15 years. Annual Roth IRA limits are still applicable, and recent contributions are restricted. And there is currently a $35,000 limited lifetime limit on these 529 to Roth rollovers. So the money doesn't necessarily become worthless, okay? It's not like your money just gonna be sitting out there and never land and you can't touch it. Just because your son or your daughter decides they rather, do something else, some other type of maybe career path or trade or other than attend a college, that does not necessarily trap your money in that 529 plan. The reality is college isn't the only path to prosperity. And fortunately, our education savings laws are beginning to recognize that. There are many, many of our students that will go on to other pathways. And I like to look at it like that. And that's when I talk to students, I talk to them about pathways. There are other pathways. Right now, a lot of students really do need to be thinking about the trades and what they offer. Job opportunities sitting there waiting for them in as little as sometimes 18 to 24 months when they complete these programs with not a lot of student loan debt, maybe not any at all, versus students who do choose to go to four-year colleges or into these programs where they are not prepared. Nobody prepared for them. Nobody set up a 529 plan for them or a Coverdell account for them. And so now they're having to try to figure out, because that scholarship didn't, short, they didn't get the full ride, they got a partial ride. So how are we going to pay for the rest of these expenses? So it doesn't necessarily mean that it makes sense for every child to do that. Some of our children are choosing other pathways, and let's encourage them. Let's learn to encourage them. Everything ain't for everybody. And that's said from somebody who has spent a lot of time in school, you guys. I invested a lot of time and a lot of money in my education, but I do understand I'm not narrow-minded enough to think that college is for everybody. Because think about it, if everybody went, then where would the people that do our trades, where would they come from? And this time of year, I'm gonna tell you who some of my good friends are: the HVAC guy, my electrician, and my plumber. And I don't care whether they went to, college or not, as long as they know what they're doing, Mr. Armstrong, they're good with me. So we have got to get out of this box of thinking that the only way that our kids are going to be successful is if they go to the university. Because honestly, if they're not prepared, if they don't have the right foundation, in a lot of instances, we could be setting them up for failure. They don't have the right foundation. I remember when I went to the illustrious Southern University down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Baton Rouge on the Bluff. My history professor, Mr. Lowe, told us the first day in class, Mr. Armstrong, said Southern University, my friends, is known as the party university. You can party your way in here, but I assure you, you will party your way out. So I need you to look to the right and look to the left. Because one of y'all probably would not be in here at the end of the semester. And he did not lie. He did not lie. There were several folks that did not make it. Let's say many didn't make it, but I'm so happy I was one of the ones who did. One of the ones who did. So we got to think about that with our children. Now, I'm looking at the clock, and I think this is an appropriate time to go to a break. I need you to get your mind right and come on back, because on the other side of this break, we're about to talk about these Trump accounts. So I'm going to throw it to my friend, Mr. Armstrong. We're going to go to a break. Don't you leave me. Come on back.
Rise and shine, so talks money, the future's alive. Grab your coffee, let's take a ride. It's wealth and wisdom, time will rise. Author, Mr. Educator, sharing the wealth, building things you should know. From trust to banking, it's all a must. Your guide to what this money can trust. Let's unite us, secure it right. Dreams take shape with every insight. Wills and assets, life insurance plans, building for your future with expert hands. So talks money and more, building wealth with knowledge galore. Asset protection plans to grow, so you can watch your dreams overflow. From saving today to trust for life, breaking generational wealth divides. Healthcare directives, banking tips, we're here to help your fortune eclipse. From saving today to trust for life, breaking generational wealth divides. Healthcare directives, learn. So wisdom's your return. Invest, protect, and thrive for sure. Signing off is what talks money and
Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is time to rise and shine for another edition of Soul Talks Money and More. I am your host, Dr. Sabrina Edmon Williams, educator, author, and investor. Opening minds and closing contracts. I am so noted. And this morning, if you missed the first half, you got to go back to YouTube and catch that first half. Because we are discussing something that many parents really need to consider sooner rather than later. Not just parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, anybody that is invested and investing in the education of our children. We are talking about 529 plans, education plans, state-sponsored education plans, Coverdell education savings account, and the new kid on the block, that Trump account that had some folks up in arms. Don't get it twisted. Don't let the name on the account keep you from the money. Now, in the first half of the hour, we started off by distinguishing two words that you need to be familiar with, and that's tax-deferred versus tax-free. In summary, quick summary, remember, deferred simply means you're not paying the taxes now, but down the road, Uncle Sam will be waiting on you with his hand out. Tax-free typically means you okay. You pay your taxes on the front end, and then any growth that comes with the account is typically eligible to be taken tax-free. No taxes involved. So, first half of the hour, we broke down the 529 accounts. Those are the state-sponsored plans. We talked about the Coverdell account. We also reminded folks, don't get upset about whose name is on an account. Mr. Coverdell's name is on that education savings account, and we don't know him. Maybe the folks over in Georgia know him. I don't know him, never met the man, but that didn't stop me from getting Coverdell accounts for my children. So let's talk about this new kid on the block. This Trump account is the one that has everybody talking, the Trump account. First, again, let's clear up one misconception. A Trump account is not primarily an education savings account like the Coverdell and the 529. Under federal law, it's a special type of individual retirement account established for a child. Any eligible U.S. child under the age of 18 with a Social Security number can potentially have one established. Any child, okay? Any child under the age of 18 with a Social Security number can potentially have one established. But there's an additional benefit for children born during a particular window. If your child is a U.S. citizen and born between January the 1st of 2025 and December the 31st of 2028, the federal government provides a one-time $1,000 pilot contribution when the required election is made. Yes, they do. $1,000. Let me say that again. $1,000 if your child is a U.S. citizen born between January the 1st, 2025 and December the 31st, 2028. You don't have to contribute the $1,000 to get the government's $1,000, okay? It's not a match. Nobody is saying if you put in 1,000, we'll put in 1,000. You simply sign up and $1,000 magically appears in that account. Ask me how I know, okay? Because it is very simple. You download an app, you put in the required information, and then they send you, confirmation that your account has been established and it has been funded with the $1,000. You do have to take the required steps to establish the account. You can't sit on the sidelines and talk about it. You got to be about it. Don't leave money on the table because you don't like the name engraved on the table. Don't leave the money on the table. Now, How much can go into a Trump account? Well, during the child's growth period, the general annual contribution limit is currently at $5,000 with inflation adjustment scheduled after 2027. So for 2026, you can, and 2027, you can put up to $5,000 into the account if you so choose. After 2027, that is likely to change. It will likely increase because, of course, inflation increases. Now, certain exempt contributions, including the federal $1,000 pilot contribution, don't count against that regular limit. So what that means is for those of us that established those accounts this year, we can still put $5,000 on top of the $1,000 pilot that is already in there. Now, employers may also contribute currently up to $2,500 annually under qualifying employer programs, with those employer contributions generally counting toward the applicable $5,000 annual limit. So if you are fortunate enough to work for an employer that offers that as, let's say, a benefit to employees, and this is new, so maybe not a lot of employers are doing it right now, but this may be something that employers are moving toward, because trust me, they get credits. They don't just do it because they're generous and that they like you that much. They are getting some type of tax credit or tax incentive for for putting that $2,500 in that account for you. I mean, I ain't trying to be ugly. It is what it is. I'm just being real this morning, just being real. Okay. So if your employer was to put up to $2,500 in that account as a benefit for you, then that limits your contribution to $2,500 because you can only do $5,000 annually for right now. But now here's an important difference. Remember, we talked about that 529 and the Coverdell being tax-free. They grow, the growth is tax-free and the qualified withdrawals are tax-free. During the growth period, Trump account investments are restricted to qualifying low-cost investments tracking broad U.S. stock indices, okay? So this isn't a savings account sitting at a bank earning, let's say 0.0002% interest. These savings account, don't get me started. I digress. Let me come on back. This is not an account sitting at the bank earning no money. The objective is participation in the growth of the American stock market. So these accounts are linked to the market. That also means the account carries investment risk because stocks go up and stocks come down. There's no guaranteed rate of return, but we love the stock market. Nothing wrong with it. I'm not here denouncing it at all. I had a conversation with a guy who's doing some wonderful work, by the way, educating people and getting people to invest in the stock market. But we cannot be so narrow-minded and so short-sighted as to put all our eggs in one basket, okay? Maybe a good basket to put your eggs into, but there is a term called diversification. We got to put money in something else that doesn't necessarily go up and down like a roller coaster. But let's just look at what that $1,000 could potentially become. Let's play with the math. Suppose the original $1,000 earned an average 7% annually for 18 years and nobody added another dime. So literally all you did was download the app, get everything set up, got the confirmation that the $1,000 was in the account. Now, given that, again, the market is tied to the market and the market goes up and the market goes down, it could grow to approximately maybe anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000. It could, with no other contributions made. It really is dependent on how the market does. And the reality is the market is not going to necessarily just go down and never bounce back. It's like a roller coaster. It goes up and down. Okay. But now suppose your family contributed $5,000 every year for 18 years and earns an average of 7%. Now, depending on the contribution timing, we're talking about something in the neighborhood of 170,000 to 180,000 that particular account could potentially grow to, plus the effect of the original government contribution. Again, this is for illustrative purposes only. We're not suggesting or promising that the market is going to give you a 7% return. But what we do need to understand is the power of compounding, the power of starting early, the power of being consistent, and the power of growth. Compound interest doesn't ask your race, your zip code, or who you voted for. It asks two questions. How much did you invest and how long did you leave it alone? That's all it wants to know. It can be your friend if you're on the right side of it, but if you're on the wrong side of it, it can be a foe. So I need you to listen closely. A Trump account does not give you the same education tax treatment as the 529. During the growth period before age 18, distributions generally aren't even allowed except for limited statutory exceptions. After 18, traditional IRA rules generally begin to apply. Traditional IRA rules can provide exceptions to the additional 10% early withdrawal penalty for certain purposes, including qualifying higher education expenses and qualifying first home purchases. So, because this acts as a special type of IRA, pretty much the same rules that apply to the traditional IRAs will apply to these accounts. So that means I think it's 59 and a half that you have to wait to start taking the withdrawals from the IRA without there being a pre-withdrawal penalty. But there are some exceptions again with this account, and that's for qualifying higher education expenses and qualifying first home purchases. But this is the part I need you to hear. An exception from a penalty is not necessarily an exception from income taxes. Okay? So just because you're not penalized for that type of withdrawal, that does not mean that, or not necessarily mean that there won't be a tax consequence. And that's the major difference, a major distinction between the Trump accounts and, let's say, the 529 or the Coverdell accounts. With the 529, qualified education withdrawals can be federally tax-free. With the Trump account, you're dealing with traditional IRA-style taxation after the special childhood rule ends. Okay, so there is an advantage, there is a benefit, but you want to make sure that you understand the difference. Never, and I mean never, confuse penalty-free with tax-free. Just because something does not penalize you does not necessarily mean that it is tax-free. Those are two totally, entirely different conversations. Never confuse penalty-free with tax-free. Those are two entirely different conversations. So, Dr. Williams, you've given us a lot to think about. Which one is better? Which one is better? Is the 529 better? Is it the Coverdell better? Is it the Trump account better? I know someone is saying that. Which one? Just tell me which one should I open? And I'm going to frustrate you here because The answer is it depends. If you know me, my answer is always it depends. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I don't know what you're trying to accomplish. If your primary objective is education, then you may want to certainly compare the tax advantages of a 529. If you want educational flexibility from elementary school through college, then you may want to examine the Coverdell. But if you have a qualifying baby who can receive that $1,000, that Trump account contribution, you may need to think about that and certainly understand what you're eligible to claim and what that actually means in terms of the growth of the account. So if you want to really like plant a seed for your child or your children in their future, maybe that Trump account is the way for you to go. But long term, you got to plant the seeds and leave them there long term. You cannot treat this like a quote unquote traditional savings account. You cannot treat it like a traditional savings account, meaning when you run short, you go over there and you take the money out of it, because that's not what this is. These are long-term educational plans, okay? Long-term educational plans. Now, here's the beautiful part. This doesn't necessarily have to be an either or. There's nothing that says you got to get one or the other. It could be a both and, but it depends on what your family is trying to accomplish. A family can potentially have more than one type of account. I've done that in my own family, more than one type of account. But you have to decide, is this money specifically for education? And if it is, then maybe the 529 is the way to go. Then say, this other money, this may be for my child's long-term financial future. You might want to consider the Trump account for that. Different dollars, different jobs, different tax consequences, if that's what you want to do. Don't ask the question, which account is best, until you first ask what job you need the money to do. How do I want these dollars working for me? How do I want these dollars working for me? Now, let's go ahead. I'm looking at the time, so I got to get to this quickly. Let's address the elephant in the room. Now, I want to spend some time talking specifically to my community, my Black families, because when this program was announced, I heard some immediate reactions regarding people's perceptions of these Trump accounts. People said, hey, I don't want nothing to do with them because they have Mr. Trump's name on them. I don't trust it. What's the catch? I don't understand, why are they doing that? Well, okay, I get it. I'm going to be honest. I get it. I do understand the concerns. I'm not advocating for anybody. Financial decisions don't happen in a historical vacuum, though. For generations, Black Americans have experienced discriminatory lending, housing discrimination, exclusion from financial institutions, and public policies that didn't always benefit us equally. So we know that. So I do understand skepticism toward government and financial institutions. I get it. And that isn't something we should simply ridicule or pass on like, it didn't happen and it's not necessarily justified. But healthy skepticism and automatic rejection are two different things. We should investigate. We should read. We should ask questions. We should understand the rules and then decide. If it's for you. Okay? Now, me personally, I'm going to be honest, you guys. I am more of a fan of anything that grows tax-free. I really, really, really am. And honestly, if you really do some study, you could find a way. There are ways, and we have to have that conversation off air. But there are ways that you can even take those Coverdell accounts, those $2,000, and turn them into far more than you could ever even think or imagine with the invest it properly. But there are ways that you have to do it. You got to know what you're doing. And that takes getting a little bit more advanced level of education on that one. As of July 15th, the U.S. Treasury reported that more than 6.5 million families had signed up for Trump accounts, including more than 1.5 million children eligible for the $1,000 federal contribution. More recent reporting indicates enrollments have now exceeded 7 million accounts. But here's something equally important to consider. I could not really find any data to tell me statistically how this breaks down by race. So I don't know how many of us are actually signing up for these accounts. What I will ask you to consider, though, if somebody is basically saying, here's $1,000, even if you didn't add another dime to it, the money potentially could grow to anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000, depending on how long you leave it there. If you leave it there until the person is 59 and a half, it's probably going to grow to far more than that. Are there going to be tax consequences? I'm not sugarcoating anything. Absolutely. Yes, there are going to be tax consequences because this is a tax-deferred account. It is not a tax-free account. So you have to decide within your own heart what works for you, what works for you. What I will encourage us to start doing, though, is rethinking what we are doing financially when it comes to our children and the opportunities that we have to put money aside for them. We spend a lot of money on Christmas presents and birthday presents, and that's great. I remember as a child getting Christmas presents and birthday presents. But do they really need everything that we buy them? Do they really? Can we not take just a little bit of that money that we spending getting little Johnny all the things that he has on his Christmas wish list and put down a little bit of that money into an account that could grow, whether it's the 529, whether it's the Coverdell, or it's the Trump account? That's your choice. That's your decision. My challenge is for us to think differently. Let's stop giving all the money to Walmart and Target. They got enough money, y'all. I promise they do. Let's start investing in our own. Let's start investing in our own. Building wealth isn't about starting with what somebody else has. It's about starting with what you have. Bottom line, it's about starting with what you have. Now, questions that I have so many things that I want to ask and want to say about this, but I don't want to go over my time. So I'm going to go ahead and just start wrapping this thing up. And I thank you to each of you who have tuned in. This morning, we have talked about savings plans for our children and our children's futures. Okay. We've talked about the 529 state-sponsored plans. We've talked about the Coverdell education plans, and we have talked about the new Trump accounts. Again, this is not an either-or type situation. It really does depend on what your objectives are for your children and your family. So here's what I want you to remember when you leave me today. Our children don't need us to know everything. None of us know everything. We're all still learning. But they do need us to be willing to learn. And one of the greatest gifts that we can give a child isn't simply money. It's time plus money plus knowledge. Because $1,000 invested when they're a year old is different from $1,000 handed to them when they turn 18. Time changes money. Compounding changes money. Ownership changes money. Education changes what families are able to do with money. So whether you choose Coverdell, 529, or the Trump accounts, or some combination of them, or another strategy altogether, the biggest mistake may be doing nothing because you're waiting until you have enough, because you're waiting. So I encourage you today, start learning, start planning, and when appropriate, start investing. Start investing. And it doesn't take a lot. Just give one less Christmas present, one less birthday present, one less store trip to the store to buy candy or whatever. Start investing, because our children shouldn't have to begin building wealth from zero simply because that's where somebody before us had to begin. And if we're being honest, we shouldn't even want that for our children. If you started from zero, then certainly you should not want your children to start from zero. Give your children more than an inheritance. Give their money time to grow. And grandparents, I'm talking to some of us too. Sometimes we have to stand in the gap for our children. Maybe it's us that has to put down the seed, plant the seed. Wealth isn't just what you leave behind, it's what you intentionally put in motion. And finally, our children cannot inherit financial education or financial decisions that we never made. Again, our children cannot inherit financial decisions we never made. This is Dr. Sabrina Edmon Williams, educator, author, and investor, opening minds and closing contracts. I am so noted. And remember, money flows where trust goes. And when trust matters, learn to trust. Learn to trust. It has been my pleasure to be here with you this morning. If the good Lord says the same, I'll be right back here next week. Same time, same station. Peace.
Money more.